Welcome to Marketers Talking Marketing.
Welcome to another episode of Marketers Talking. Today we are joined by Sam. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm Sam Cordry. I'm the owner and founder of Cordry Creative, which is essentially a full service marketing agency. We start with the basics of helping our clients just really define who they are and who they serve, what makes them unique, some of those proof points, and then build out a thoughtful strategy and an execution plan from there to help them achieve all of the marketing goals.
Awesome. So what made you go down this path?
I've always been a writer. And so telling people's stories has always just naturally been something that I've been interested in. And through the agency, probably one of the most asked questions or dilemmas that my clients ask me about and that we talk through is, how do I talk about myself without feeling like a fraud, feeling phony? And that's kind of where it started. And so to come in and just really be a partner to help, be kind of a third party to help clients define what that is. And as someone who maybe not be from the industry that they work in and, isn't familiar with the lingo and, some of those inside nuances, to just be able to come in and really help people tell their stories in a thoughtful way is just something that's always been enjoyable to me.
It's crazy how hard it is to build your own story. Yeah. And if anyone's listening and they haven't had to go write the story of themselves and write their bio and really think about that structure, I feel like it's the hardest thing to do for yourself, even when you do it a million times for other people. And so working with someone else, I assume, is really what can help unlock it for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think it kind of can take the pressure off. I mean, it is admittedly, I do this for a living and it's hard still for me. So yeah, I think to have someone who, it's almost like a therapist, to have someone who's an unbiased person to help you work through that and define really what that looks like, it's tremendously helpful.
Yeah, I feel like whenever I see a candidate when I'm interviewing and they'll put down, I'm okay, like mediocre, not mediocre, no one puts mediocre on their resume. They'll put down like basic Excel skills, and then I talk to them and I'm like, you're actually above average.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, what? Because if you don't know what other people are doing, it's gonna be kind of hard to get there. So if someone's listening and they're saying, oh, I've really been putting off, updating my bio or the about, where can they start with thinking about telling their story?
Yeah, I think it starts with just thinking small. Like, think of the everyday moments that are impactful to you, that mean something to you. For me, and again, it's small. I have 2 dogs that 99% of the day are asleep. And as soon as I get on a meeting, or you'll probably hear them bark at some point during this episode, like without fail, I have something going on. And then that's when they decide to wake up and play and bark and all the things. So it can be as little as that. But I think just thinking about the things that you experience in your everyday life that mean something to you and that are part of who you are. I think also, think about the stories that you tell on a regular basis, or the things that you talk about just naturally, whether it's with clients or in your personal life, whatever those things are. Like, what are the things that you're already talking about? And I think listening to your gut is something that I talk about with my clients a lot. Like, what are the things that feel right? What are the things that you want to talk about? What do you want to be known for? When you think about your business, why did you start it in the first place? What are the things that light you up? I think all of those things are impactful things to incorporate into your story. And I think too, there's a vulnerability that comes with telling your story and authentically, like, this is who I am, and leaning into the lessons and the wins and the hardships and all of those things that make us who we are. Like, I think that vulnerability is a great place to start, and just keeping it simple.
Yeah, I feel like it can be really scary for some people. Yes. I am a chronic oversharer. Even on LinkedIn. Yeah. I'm here. You're going to judge. I don't care. And people have said to me before, like, I could never be so open, but I feel like you almost have to in order to really make that connection with people nowadays.
Yes. And I think it's something that people are craving, honestly. Business marketing, it's a savvy place, and there's more competition, and I don't see, that trend going away. And I think with all of the competition and options that people have of brands and companies to work with, I think there's a really big desire to work with people that they resonate with and whose stories that they can connect to. And when they feel like they have a connection and a relationship with you or with your brand or with your business, that's when people want to work with you. And so I think it just really helps set people apart as well.
Yeah. I was going to ask, do you think that showing up as your authentic, true self in the way that you present yourself online and not just trying to fit into what you think someone in your industry would find an expert to look like, do you think that can be a competitive advantage for people who are willing to be vulnerable?
100%. Yes. Because I think if you're not, I also think people can see through that. Consumers are savvy. So I think if you're just following the trends or you're not really being authentic or speaking to who you are and what you do, I think people can feel that right away. But then it's also, say they start working with you and then the experience that they had with you on social or through your email marketing or however they engage with you in the first place, when that experience doesn't align with what it's actually like to engage with you as in your business, that's a huge letdown. Like that's the last thing that we want as a business owner is to have that expectation not align with the reality. And so I think it's a huge competitive advantage to just be who you are. I think it helps you attract the right clients, the right opportunities, the right people, all the things.
Yeah, it's almost a red flag when you start working with someone and you see that they're totally different than they present online.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. So if someone is listening and they're terrified of being themselves, terrified of really putting themselves out there, are there any tips or recommendations you have for them to get more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to something that we talked about earlier of what are the things that you're already talking about? And it doesn't have to be, I think too, people think that they have to have these grand stories about their experiences and their lives and they really don't. You know, something that, you know, to use myself as an example again, I talk about the weather a lot. I live in Michigan. The weather is like a common topic. It's like almost summer, so it's beautiful.
It's such a Midwest thing.
Midwest thing. Like I totally fall into that stereotype. And I just the other day I was on a client meeting and we were just making small talk before we got into our agenda. And we were talking about the weather. And I'm like, how's the weather in Chicago? It's sunny here. Or, you know, if it's cloudy here and it affects my mood, like that's something I like to talk about the weather. And, you know, incorporating that into my marketing language and into my email marketing and you know, the places that I show up, like that's just a natural extension of me and it's nothing crazy. So I think when people think that they have to have these incredible stories, like you really don't. Just show up as who you are and it's more relatable that way and it's more authentic.
Anecdotally, I used to use Warmly's Zoom extension when they first launched. For those familiar with Warmly, you may not remember, but Warmly used to be a Zoom extension that would have information about you. And so I would have the Warmly overlay and it always had the weather up. And that was such a conversation starter. Like if you need a spot to start, everyone hates shitty weather. Some people love the rain and everyone likes good weather. And people like, I would say 90% of my meetings, that's what we'd open with because you would see like, oh shit, where you're at, it's 110 degrees. How do you survive that?
Yeah, I know. I feel like I'm like a 85-year-old lady like talking about the weather, but people like to talk about the weather.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
It's a universal grounding thing. 100%. And I think it's interesting, kind of a little bit of a story segue. What I found when I started getting more, I'm going to say, when I started intentionally networking is sometimes also, I think, figuring out those little tidbits of things that can be conversation starters that you go back to can definitely be helpful. Weather also for me is one. I have two dogs also who typically aren't barking, but sometimes you can hear them snoring. And so
my dogs do that too.
Yeah. So I started leaning into those kind of like you're talking about the things that you say, the things you talk about. I started leaning into those and using those more. And then I found after a little bit, I started to become almost known for a little bit of them. Like internally at a last company, I guess I haven't, when I start meetings, I tend to be like, hello. And so they're like, oh, you're like Miss Doubtfire.
I love
And
it.
yeah, and so it can kind of help bring it together, make it more cohesive, I feel like.
Can. And yeah, I mean, I think the other beautiful thing about just leaning into your story is it's yours and it's not going anywhere. And if you've got a few things that you talk about that you've kind of got your spiel down, or you know in what situations that it makes sense to share different things, or you're able to relate them to different things, it's evergreen content. So I think, another piece of marketing that I think people struggle with is the consistency of showing up consistently on whatever platform you're on, and having your story and being able to repurpose different parts of your story depending on what your audience needs or where you're at in your business or your own evolution. I think it's just tremendously helpful.
Yeah. It feels like that is one of the positives that came out of this push towards work from home, where it's more comfortable to be yourself because we're seeing so much more of each other.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I think we have to be. And again, I think people, because more people are remote and we're not all together in person, I think showing up as who you are helps to just foster those connections when there's already a little bit more of a barrier to making those connections in the first place. So yeah, I think it's the push toward telling your story and being authentic, and it's just, yeah, it's aligning very much with the world we live in today.
Now, if you're representing a brand, should the brand then have almost a personal identity and make it almost like a human, make it personified? Or is it more having the executives and all of the employees who represent the brand active with who they are and kind of leading with their personal story?
I think it can be both. And I think that's the beauty is, every brand, every company, every solopreneur, it's different for everyone. But, you think about brands that have a personality, like Wendy's, like comes to mind with like Twitter, X,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
when they, snap back, or even like at Starbucks, with some of their stuff. I think the brand itself can have a personality. And I also think the executives at the company too, through their personal channels, through the things that they're involved in, like they are an extension of the brand and of the story, and their values and the things that they're involved in are very much a reflection of the company and what it stands for too. So I think it can be both.
I feel like executives today are almost celebrities in a sense that we didn't see 20 years ago. Like we know what Jeff Bezos is doing beyond just his decisions with Amazon. It's kind of, I'm not going to say it's weird. It was definitely a shift in almost the celebritification, not a word, but I think we get where we're going with that. Yeah, of executives. It's almost expected now too. Like, I think if you see a brand and the executive isn't active online, it's like, well, what's wrong with them? What's wrong with the brand?
That's a very good point. And that's not something that I've actually have really thought about, but you are totally right, because like a Jeff Bezos, what he does in his personal life that has nothing to do with Amazon impacts Amazon. So yeah, I think executives, have to, it's something to be mindful of. I don't think it's something to be scared of. I think it, taking a thoughtful approach to it, but it can really, on the positive side, it can really grow your business and your brand if your executives are showing up authentically and in a way that's aligned with everything else that you're trying to do.
Yeah. Is there anyone you think that is doing it really well that we could look at as an example?
Ooh, the first person that comes to mind is she's a blogger, podcaster, marketer, Jenna Kutcher. I don't know if you've heard of her.
I have, but I can't place
so she has a Gold Digger podcast.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Now I know.
Business podcast. And I have been following her for years. So and I know her story. She started as a wedding photographer, and then she got into marketing and doing courses. And now her content has kind of shifted as she's became a mom and is kind of focusing on the balance between work and motherhood and all the things. But I think she is someone who does a really great job of just sharing her story and also repurposing her story. Things that she's talked about years ago are still things that I'm seeing show up in her content today. And so she does a really nice job of being able to take the pieces of your story and repurpose those. And she's also, I think for me, has been a good example of someone whose story has evolved over time. Because I think that's part of it too. Like the stories that we use now may not be the things that we talk about 6 months, a year, 5 years from now. And she's been someone who I think has done a very good job of, as her story and again, her business. She started as a wedding photographer and now she is a businesswoman and a podcaster and an online course creator. And so she's taken a pretty massive shift in her business. And she's done a very good job of including her story in that and evolving it as her business and her goals have continued to evolve. So she's definitely someone I'd recommend checking out.
I love your note about repurposing, because I feel like the biggest irrational fear that people have in marketing is reusing content, and they think that they'll get penalized on social on the platforms. They think their audience will get annoyed. And the reality is no one sees 100% of the content you shared. And it's likely that today the people following you aren't the same people as 2 or 3 years ago. And there's, value in repetition. Gary Vaynerchuk does this quite often. He'll share literally the exact same quote in 50 different formats over a 3 or 4 month period. Yeah. And so you start to see it and then you associate it. So don't be afraid of repurposing.
Do not be afraid to repurpose. I would 100% echo that. I do think people are scared of that. And people aren't paying attention to us as much as we like to think that they are. And like you said, people miss things. So yeah, I think, being able to repurpose things, and also just because you share your story in one format or you tie it to one component of your business, you can tie that to different components of your business. Or, if there's new things that come up, be able to evolve that story within the greater sphere of your business. So, and I mean, people consume content in different ways, repurposing things in different ways to see what resonates. You just don't know. So yes, repurpose.
Yeah, I'm guessing with Jenna's story, you've heard it more than once too.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, which is why you remember it.
Exactly. Yeah. And then it's also shown up in different ways, or it's resonated with me at different points in my journey too. It's not just the journey of the business or the business owner. It's also the journey that your customers are on too. And so things that you talk about at one point in your business, that might not really resonate with me, but 6 months from now, when, if I'm an entrepreneur, my business is maybe a little bit more established at this point, and now I'm really focusing on these different things, they start to resonate in a different way. So you just never know where you're hitting people on their journey either.
Yeah. Are there other common stumbling blocks or pitfalls you see people run into as they're starting to think about telling their story?
I think the vulnerability piece is probably the biggest just stumbling block of, how do I be vulnerable? How do I also talk about like accomplishments and not come off as like braggy, or like I'm trying to be vulnerable and thoughtful, but I'm talking about this positive thing that I did or this product that I want you to buy. Like, how do I balance both objectives? I think is something that I see that people struggle with a lot. And I think if you're leading from a place of service, like if your heart is genuinely in the right place, and I know this sounds a little abstract, but if you're doing what feels right and you're doing it to help other people and you're doing it in service of others and to make the world a better place, I don't think you can go wrong. So, I think if you have ulterior motives and you're like, just buy my product, or just hire me for this service, or, like that shines through. So I think if you're genuinely leading from a place of wanting to help people, you can balance the vulnerability and the sharing your story while also moving your business forward.
I think that's also such a Midwest struggle of talking about your accomplishments without feeling weird about being braggy or too much.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, you have to talk about yourself. And when you do things, especially as a business owner, like what we were saying, people forget. People aren't paying attention as much as we think that they are. So yeah, you have to talk about yourself. That's definitely a Midwest fear.
Yeah. I always try and think about some of like the individuals that I've worked with over the course of my career who have no issue bragging about themselves. And I think like, what would they do in this situation? What would they say? Like,
Yes.
what would Andrew do? He would
Yes.
100% be posting about this on LinkedIn every day for a month and a half.
Yes.
So
yeah.
it's okay if I do it once or twice.
Yes. Channel your inner Andrew.
Yeah. You know, fake it till you make it sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, yes, it can feel, there can be a clunkiness that you feel. And I think that's normal. And I think it's okay. I think just remembering that just because you maybe feel a little bit uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's not the right thing to do, or that it's the wrong, that you're doing something wrong. And the more that you tell your story, and the more that, again, you refine it and you figure out, what resonates with your audience and what feels right for you and your brands, the better you're going to get at it and the more natural it's going to feel. So I think the biggest thing is to just start and just to keep going and refine as you go. I think that's the beauty of marketing and just working in a creative space, is that you can start and test and see what works, and you have the ability to pivot. And I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. How are you measuring and really deciding on if something is working or not working?
Yeah, I think there's a few metrics that you can probably look at. I mean, I think follower growth, are you attracting the right people? And also that retention, are people staying with you and, continuing to engage with you? And I think, if you're a service-based business and you're working with clients, I think that client retention piece, are you aligned with, is what your story, what you're putting out, is your story aligned with the experience that people are getting with you? I think, and keeping track of it that way. And then I would also say referrals, whether you're a product-based business, a service-based business, are people talking about you in a positive light? Are they referring people to you? I think that's a great gauge on the relationships and the trust and the authenticity factor that you've built with the people that you serve.
Yeah. Authenticity factor.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it'd be interesting to have that as like a measurable quotient in kind of your like database of metrics.
Yes.
But I feel like the measurement would be a vibe.
Yes, 'cause that's the other part of it. I think, engagement and followers and referrals, like those are all things that you can track. But I also think we don't often put enough value on just the way things feel for us as business owners, or, as the marketing department, like, and how are we showing up, and does it feel like we're doing something right? Does this feel like it's aligned with our brand? And while, there's not, it's a vibe, like you said, but I think it's important too to gauge whether you're on or off.
Yeah. I was talking to a guest we recorded a couple weeks ago, and I had asked what the main metric was for their performance. They're like, honestly, it's just a vibe. It's like, that's so refreshing in a world where it feels like we over measure so many different things. It's kind of refreshing to be able to say, we intrinsically know if it works or it doesn't work based on these things that aren't quite measurable, but they're measurable in their own way.
Yeah, I mean, marketing is as much a science and data and numbers as it is an art. So there is that balance. And yeah, I don't think, not everything in marketing is truly quantifiable, but I'm a big believer in just listening to what feels right for you, like getting quiet with yourself. And what feels right, what doesn't. And I think it's very easy to ignore that. And I think the businesses and the brands that don't, and that really listen to that voice and use that to guide them, I think are the ones that are ultimately successful.
Is there any advice you'd give to someone who is sitting on their story, who sat down, they wrote it out, they have it together, and they're just terrified to publish?
I would say, I think something that I think about when I'm feeling insecure, or like I'm not worthy, or my story is not good enough to share, or whatever, the insecurities that we all experience. There's only one me. There's only one the way that I show up in my business and the way that I serve my clients and my experiences and my opinions, those are uniquely mine, and people want to work with me because of that. And it's the same for all of us. Like, we all have our own backgrounds. We've all got our own stories. We've all got our own makeups, and those are incredibly powerful. And there's someone out there that needs you. And I think, when I'm feeling in that space of feeling intimidated, I think about the person or the brand or the entity that needs what I have to share and needs my story. And that helps me, at least in the moment, helps me push through. And then I think, once you hit publish, then, I think it's very rewarding. And I think it's therapeutic too, to talk about your story and to just be authentically you. We're building businesses to make money, of course, and to live our lives and all the things, but it also has to be enjoyable for you along the way. And I think when you can lean into your story and just show up as you are, there's an enjoyment in that as well, and that's also important.
Yeah, 100%. If anyone is listening and they are nervous about sharing their story, just clip that and save it on your desktop, and anytime that you're feeling nervous about it, go rewatch that, because that's fantastic. Yes. Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone wants to connect or learn more about you, where do they go?
Yes. So my website's the best place, cordrycreative.com. You can sign up for the email list. You can connect with me there. Personally, I'm not the most active on social, but you can find me on Instagram at Sam Cordry. I'm on LinkedIn as well. You can connect with me there. And yeah, would love to connect.
Fantastic. We will put all the links in the show notes below, and we'll see everyone on the next episode.